So are we going to be seeing all these squares, or would me and Georgia just see each other?
Yeah, you'll just see some black squares, and they can hear us now. So
Great.
I'll do the introduction for self. Maybe I should sing. Maybe I should sing some John Prine while we're
There you go.
I think so.
I think I won't subject all y'all that. I think I'll just welcome you here to this virtual event. My name is Lynn Roberts, and I'm coming to you from Square Books in Oxford, Mississippi, and we're very pleased to have you here. So on our ticket tonight are M.O. Neil Walsh with his new novel, The Big Door Prize, and it is published by Putnam, and George Singleton with his new collection of selected stories, You Want More, from Hub City Press. But first, we have a little housekeeping to do and some announcements that I want to make. So your microphones are muted and everyone's videos are off. But you may type questions in the chat room at any time, and we will get to as many of those as we can before the end of the event. We have a very active schedule of virtual events at Square Books, and you may see the announcement for those by visiting our website, which is squarebooks.com. You can sign up for our weekly email newsletter, Speed Reader. We also post events and other book news on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. On our YouTube channel, you can see recordings of past events, including last Monday's conversation with Ron Rash and John Grisham. And we just learned today that John Grisham has a new book coming out on October 13th, and he will be doing a conversation with Richard Howarth on the 12th in preparation for that. Our next event will be Friday, September 18th, beginning at 5 p.m. Central. Larry Wells will be talking about his newly released memoir, In Faulkner's Shadow, with his friend, the artist Bill Dunlop. Larry Wells was married to Dean Faulkner Wells, Faulkner's niece, and so this is the memoir of their life together. On Saturday, September 19th at 10 a.m. Central, Josh Funk will do a virtual story time on Square Books Junior's Facebook Live page with his newest story of Lady Pancake and Sir French Toast, who are Square Books Junior favorites, and this new one is called Short and Sweet. On September 24th at 5 p.m., Rakshana Chokshi will be discussing her second in the Gilded Wolves YA fantasy series, The Silvered Serpents. She will be in conversation with S.A. Chakraborty, author of the Devabad fantasy series. Some of these events will be on Zoom, and to join a Zoom event, you need to send an email to rsvp@squarebooks.com with the book title or author in the subject line, and you will receive an email with a Zoom link 1 hour before the event begins. So now to our event tonight. M.O. Walsh, who we have known as Neil, was born and raised in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He has degrees from the University of Tennessee and LSU, but most important to us, he has an MFA in creative writing from the University of Mississippi here, which is where we were fortunate enough to get to know him. He currently directs a creative writing workshop at the University of New Orleans, so obviously he learned quite a bit at the University of Mississippi. And his fiction and essays have appeared in the New York Times, The Guardian, Paris Review, the Southern Review, Oxford American, Best New American Voices, and many others. The Big Door Prize is his third novel. Stephen Rowley, who wrote Lily and the Octopus, a real crier, tearjerker, wrote The Big Prize here is for the readers, a heartwarming and eccentric page-turner in the grand tradition of Southern literature that will keep you wondering until the very end. Walsh writes his characters with great respect to prove we're never too old to discover new things about ourselves. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. It's a lovely novel. George Singleton has published 8 collections of stories, 2 novels, and a book of writing advice. Over 200 of his stories have appeared in magazines such as Atlantic Monthly, Harper's, Playboy, the Georgia Review, and Southern Review, among others. He has received a Pushcart Prize, a Guggenheim Fellowship, the Hillsdale Award from the Fellowship of Southern Writers. Can you see that? It's hanging on his wall behind him. It kind of looks like the Nobel Prize ribbon. It's not. It's the Hillsdale Award.
Trump gave it to me.
George first came to Oxford in 2002 for, I think These People Are Us or Half Mammals of Dixie. I'm not sure. Maybe for both. And so we have been friends for like almost 20 years. Feels like 50. In a good way, in a good way. Tom Franklin, in his introduction to this latest collection, said George Singleton could make caulk funny. And that is not a figure of speech. That's for real. We are so happy to bring these 2 writers together today. Thank y'all so much for joining us and being here. We wish we could do this in person, but this is probably a little less dangerous for us. So welcome Neil, welcome George, and welcome to all you lovely audience.
Thank you, Lynn. Hey, Neil, I'm going to go ahead and start off reading a little bit, okay?
All right, that sounds good. Yes, and thank you, Len, and thank you, Square Books. Awesome to be here.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Oh, wait, I got to start. I can do show and tell with y'all, though. I don't know who's there from, I don't know if Jim Dees is here, but he was with me when I bought this thing. It's a painting with, you know, Willie Moore. I don't know if y'all can hear me now. With Willie Moore, William Faulkner, and Larry Brown playing in a little 3-piece band. You know, I think that's probably quite realistic, as you all know, and that's from, I bought that at Taylor Grocery. They have catfish, I understand, too. Here's a beginning of a story I'll read about 5 minutes because, you know, I got all these dogs on the cover of this thing. So here's a dog story called Vaccination. My dog, Tapeworm Johnson, needed legitimate veterinary attention. It had been 2 years since she received annual shots. I read somewhere that an older dog can overdose on all these vaccinations. And I have found, I share this information with every dog owner I meet, that if you keep your pet away from rabid foxes, raccoons, skunks, bats, and people whose eyes rotate crazy in their sockets, then the chances of your own dog foaming at the mouth diminish drastically. I also believe that dogs don't need microchips embedded beneath their shoulder blades if you keep the dog leashed or in the house, or with the truck windows rolled up when you drive around showing the dog farm animals living in pastures. I brought this up to Dr. Page one time, back 4 years earlier when Tapeworm Johnson was somewhere between 8 and 9 years old. Tapeworm showed up at my door one morning back when I was married and living in a regular house. Her ribs as visible as anything you'd order down at Clem and Lida's barbecue shack off Scenic Highway 11. Her paw pads split open from, I assumed, days traveling for wherever her conscienceless owner dropped her off. Tapeworm looked coon or bird dog mostly, though she'd never pointed over the years I've known her, which might explain a stupid hunter letting her loose without a collar and so on. Seeing as nothing seemed hopeful in the marriage, I let the dog inside, took her to Dr. Page's ex-colleague, Dr. Lloyd Leck, who overdosed on horse tranquilizers a while back, though people in the community say they were only ostrich tranquilizers, seeing as Dr. Leck dealt with the more entrepreneurial ranchers who'd moved in to raise emus, llamas, and the like. And Dr. Leck said the dog had tapeworms. When I had signed in, I put Jane Doe down for Tapeworm Johnson's name. When we scheduled a second visit for a month later, so the dog could put on weight and get vaccinated for diseases I felt sure got made up by either the American Veterinary Association or the dog pill and serum manufacturers of the United States, I told the vet to put down tapeworm for a name. What the hell? There are worse possible names. The dog could have been diagnosed with some kind of blocked urethra or mange. I have a medical doctor I call Bob. I have an ophthalmologist I call Henry. There's a chiropractor who lives a mile down the road from me in one of those fake log houses built from a kit. I call him Snap Crackle Pop when I come across him at the barbecue shack. I refer to professors as teachers, which seems to piss them off. I went to college with our governor, and I call him Fucktwig now, just as I did back then. So in case anyone thinks I disparage veterinarians, who have to know all the bones of about every animal ever invented, not just the 206 of humans, understand that I call Dr. Page, and before he couldn't take it anymore and offed himself with giant bird tranquilizers, I called Dr. Leck, Dr. Leck. Tapeworm got out of my truck without any aid, and she led me to the clinic's door. One woman sat in the waiting room. She said, "Look, Loretta, you have a friend. Look at the pretty doggy," in a high-pitched voice normally used by mothers talking to nonverbal babies or school nurses to special ed first graders who shit their pants and wish they had. We have a lot of problems these days, and I think that making it a felony to speak in such a manner might eradicate gun violence in the future. When I signed in, I looked down to read Holly for the owner's name and Loretta for her dog. Under reason for visit, Holly had written toenails. Under Tapeworm's reason for visit, I wrote down change oil filter. I figured someone later would see it and then ask Dr. Page if she could check the Jack Russell's oil. I felt Tapeworm tugging toward Loretta, and when the two dogs' noses touched, they wagged their tails. Holly said, "See, they can be friends." I said, "That's good." Holly said, "Janie said she's running late. She's back there in surgery. Somebody's dog got shot in the eye. Can you imagine? Janie said it's an emergency. She's going to have to amputate the eye." Holly looked normal and friendly enough. She might have been late 30s and wore hippie clothing that somehow matched. A thin cotton lavender skirt, a black and gray tie-dyed sleeveless blouse, those sandals that cost way too much money because they supposedly offer arch support. If I ever met a podiatrist, I think I'd call him or her soul brother or soul sister like that, S-O-L-E. I didn't think amputate was the correct term for an eyeball, but I didn't say anything. Holly wasn't wearing a brassiere. She didn't shave her armpits, which didn't bother me, seeing as the majority of women living on this planet, contrary to popular American Christian belief, didn't shave anywhere, just like most men. Holly had her hair braided 3 times in long pigtails, which made me scared that she might have been one of those second-ready people who'd moved into the area, ready in a second for the second coming. I figured a second-ready woman might keep 3 braids in homage to the Trinity. Homage might not be the correct term. For some reason, I said, "I've known one-eyed dogs and they get around fine, they adapt." I sat down on the bench perpendicular to Holly. Our dogs continued to be friendly. "I'm Holly and this is Loretta," she said. "Hey, Holly, my name's Edward Johnson, this is Wanda." "Who's gonna tell a braless woman you got a dog named Tapeworm?" Wanda was my ex-wife's name. All right, that's about 5 minutes, ain't it? Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, man. It's funny. I was actually reading that story earlier today, man. I'm so glad you read that. That's awesome.
Thanks, Neil.
So I guess I want to talk about my book, but first I want people to know just how bizarre it is for me to be doing this event with you. And I mean, you don't know this, but back when I was in grad school at Ole Miss, again, it was probably, around like 2002 or something, like when Lynn was saying. And I feel like you were coming to town. You had a book, it seemed like to me back then, coming out like every year. We did a class with Tom Franklin, which he, sort of called like, Southern writers type of thing. And this was, for us at the time, like a sort of Mount Rushmore of Southern writers. It was, it was Barry Hannah and Lewis Norton, William Gay, and Half Mammals of Dixie is one of the books he put on there. And so when you were coming to town, one time I think, I hung out sort of in your orbit at City Grocery, being a student like people do, trying to be, feeling real eager and all that type of stuff. And you came back another time, like 6 months later or something, and I saw you in the square, and I went up to say hey to you, and you remembered my name. And that to me, believe it or not, was the craziest thing, and made me actually feel like a human, because man, you were partying, everybody was partying, up at City Grocery having a good time, and you're like, "Hey Neil, how you doing?" And so that little thing, man, all these years ago has stuck with me, and so now to be reading with you is incredible for me, man. So
oh man, that's
I know it's insane to me. But I want to talk about your work obviously as we go, but I know I'm supposed to talk about my book a little bit. Um, so yeah, so I have a new novel out called The Big Door Prize, and I'll give you sort of just the sort of scenario, right, and sort of what the book's mainly about, and then just read a tiny little bit. So this book takes place in a fictional town called Deerfield, Louisiana, sort of a small town that actually I had sort of Oxford in my mind when I was writing it. When school's out, maybe 12,000 people or so, everybody, there's a sort of a central square and all that type of stuff. Everybody kind of knows everybody else, or at least sees them. And what happens in this novel, what kicks it off is there's this sort of mysterious machine that shows up at the local grocery store that everybody goes to. It's sort of an unassuming machine, looks like a photo booth kind of sitting next to the big, the big green thing that everybody cashes their change in. You've done that before, George.
Yeah.
So sit next to that, but the deal is this machine, it promises that it can tell people sort of what their life's potential is based on their DNA. So in other words, if you took a DNA sample, put it into this machine, it analyzes it and sort of tells you what your body and mind are like capable of achieving, like if everything would have worked out perfectly, right? So your ultimate expression of yourself. Well, this shows up, it sounds sort of, I guess outlandish, but enough people start trying it and they get these little blue tickets out of the machine that usually just has like a one-word answer. Like one of the first people you hear about got one that said entrepreneur, right? And they're like, well, that's sort of strange. It's not really about my body, but maybe I'll try it out. And so they go and they open up a little snowball stand and it turns out to do really well, right? So enough people in town get these readouts that they sort of, everyone sort of gets curious, right? And starts doing it. And people are getting these sort of glimpses of themselves that they've never really thought of before and get excited about. And so that's sort of the premise that starts the book off. And our main characters are a married couple who've been together for about 15 years and love each other very much and are happy. Believe it or not, there are some happy couples out there, right? And they're happy, but they each get a readout that sort of sends them in really opposite directions, right? And so that's sort of the main thrust of the book. That's the heart of the book, is watching these people and watching this town. But there's some other characters, one of which I'm going to read a little bit sort of about. There's the local high school in town's a Catholic school, and the priest that works there is a guy named Father Pete. And he is involved in the action in a number of different ways. He kind of he's kind of connected to everybody. But I'm just going to read one little part of the confessional booth. There's every third Thursday, all the students in the high school have to come to the confessional booth, and people from town show up. And so there's a chapter later on in the book called "You Forgive Us, and We'll Forgive You," which is a John Prine lyric from a song called "Fish and Whistle." And we can talk about John Prine later if you want, and sort of how he plays into this book. So this book, Father Pete doesn't talk at all in this chapter. All it is just different sections of people coming in and sort of unburdening themselves to him. And so I think I might just read a couple of these, if that's cool with you, George.
I love it. I love Father Pete.
All right. Thank you. All right. So each of these is just a person coming in. I'm just going to read their thing. And when it switches people, I just raise my hand or something so you know it's switching people, right? All right. You forgive us and we'll forgive you. Look, I've read about bees, Father. You know all those bees are dying because of cell phone towers or satellites or something like that. And it turns out that we need bees just to live because they pollinate everything. It's not just about the honey is what I'm saying, although that's important too. Anyway, we were doing our porch. The whole house needs an upgrade really, but we're starting there. So I knocked down this column on the porch and there was this beehive in there, Father. You wouldn't believe it. It was bigger than anything you've seen on TV, I imagine. And my wife's allergic to bees, you see. But she was off at work and I didn't want her to come home and see them because Lord knows what kind of fit she'd throw. We'd probably end up living at her sister's place. And no telling how long they've been there too, Father, without us even knowing. But it sort of floored me, Father. I mean, I just watched them crawling over one another. I just watched them forever. And I thought about all that stuff I'd read. I thought about how sort of beautiful it all is, the whole shebang, how we're all connected together, how something little like a bee ends up putting food on my plate and lets me and my family live. But not only that, how they depend on other little things like flowers to do it too. How there's this whole grand design to the deal where nothing's wasted. But I also thought about my wife, you know, and how I told her I'd get this porch redone, how I could handle it, and we didn't need to hire nobody to charge us 3 times what I could do it for. And so I guess what I'm telling you, Father, is that I gassed them. I killed them all. It's not sitting well with me. So many of them, Father, after the gas, they just kept falling. And so I'll do another one now. And whenever anyone talks about a readout, they're talking about the thing that they got out of the machine, right? So they've tried it. So this is another person that comes in. Yeah, forgive me, Father, but I don't really have much to confess. I'm only 15. I don't have a car, and I'm at school most of the day, and I do my homework at night, and I don't get out much on the weekends, and I don't have that many opportunities to commit any really spectacular sins. Anyway, I got this readout saying I'm supposed to be a priest too. I'm not all that psyched up about it, but my parents are. I just sort of figured, well, that's typical. Of course, that's what mine would say. I'll be a virgin forever. Anyway, they wanted me to ask you, like, how does that happen? Is there some sort of school you go to? What's the pay like? Any health benefits? Forgive me, Father, but I got this readout just the other day, and do you know what it said? I'm sorry, I don't mean to cry, but do you know what it said? It said ballerina, Father. Ballerina. Just when I'd almost forgotten. I'm sorry, it's just that when I was a little girl and all through high school, if you only knew how hard I worked, how hard I trained, the money my parents spent, I guess it just reminded me. I'm sorry, I'll stop crying, I promise. I guess it just reminded me, of how I never wanted children. We were so young and stupid. And this has never been my life, really. I'm sorry, Father, but all these years, so many years, my own children, it made me remember I've never wanted them. Yeah, forgive me, Father, for I have committed the sin of lying. I have faked no less than 14 orgasms with my boyfriend since my last confession, but that was a while ago, so I'm not sure if that's a lot or maybe like right in the middle. I'll do one more. Now look, Father, this ain't easy to talk about, but I go to a lot of websites, you understand? Websites for adults. They got all sorts of stuff out there, I'm telling you. American ones and European ones and Mexican ones. A lot of stuff out of Prague, it seems. I mean, I feel like I've visited most of Prague at this point. And I'm married, so I steer clear of all that stuff that's trying to get you to meet up with local women and the like. I don't mess with all that local horny MILF type things. I mean, I have boundaries. I just look at those ones with videos of people I'll never meet. It's all on the up and up is what I'm saying. I don't do anything wrong. There's nothing illegal about it is what I'm saying. What I'm trying to communicate here is that I go to these websites a lot. Hell, you can get them on your phone if you want to. Now, I don't really want to put a number on how many times I've gone to these various sites, but I'd be willing to bet that it is pretty surprising. I'll be at work sometimes, or I'll go into the kitchen when my wife's asleep. Anytime she leaves me alone at the house, really. And I think it's been a good thing in the big picture. I think it's helped me to stay faithful, to be able to sort of relieve myself when I need to. Because God knows my wife doesn't always want to stop her life every time I get a notion, and I understand that. I'm not mad about it. I probably wouldn't want to sleep with me either. So it's not about her at all, really. The problem, though, is that I'm 48 years old, and I've been doing this a while. And I think I've finally seen every single video out there that interests me. I just go from site to site now, just sort of aimless. There isn't anything I haven't already clicked on. I can't find anything I like that I haven't already seen is what I'm saying. It's all just the same body parts over and over, doing the same up and down motions, and it makes me sort of scared, Father. Does that make sense? It's got me thinking, well, now what?
Hey, Neil, I want to talk to you a little bit.
Okay.
There's that old dictum about good novels or short stories are making the ordinary seem extraordinary or the extraordinary seem ordinary. And when I read your novel and I came across the DNAMIX machine, I won't do a spoiler alert on that at the end, but you just treat it like this is an everyday. It reminded me of John Cheever's The Enormous Radio. Did you ever read that story where these people can hear all the things going on in the apartment?
Right.
He writes it like this is an everyday thing, and that's kind of what I just loved it. I also loved it, and this is not a spoiler alert. The main character, Douglas, who I see as kind of the there's a handful of main characters really, but everybody's getting those crazy things. I'm from royalty, and we got to eat this egg baba ganoush or whatever that eggplant thing is. And everybody, I'm going to be a magician and all that. And when the main guy, who's probably the smartest man in town really, and the most, it says Whistler, And that's what he's known for, is being able to whistle any tune at any time. Where did you come up with that idea? That's a great idea.
Thank you. I mean, this is an idea that I had back when I was in grad school. Honestly, I wrote a short story sort of based on it. That was in my first collection that had this sort of, this machine that came in. And I guess I was just thinking, what's like the most sort of innocuous thing that you could be good at that, if someone came and told you, hey, actually, this is what you're meant to do, it would be really depressing.
It is really depressing. It's like floors him because everybody else, I mean, just ne'er-do-wells are, I was meant to be, whatever, a gold miner, and sure enough, you have found gold or whatever.
Yeah.
Also, about the trombone, what's the trombone? Jeffrey, I think, is Jeffrey. I want to say Darrow. What's the
Mallow?
Yeah. What is? Do you play trombone?
I don't. No. I just have the utmost respect for people who are like true wizards at any instrument, and so, music's always been that way for me. Like, I think, I tried to learn how to play guitar and I got to like the 4 chords and quickly realized that the people that I see do this on stage are in a whole different planet.
Yeah.
And so I think, the main character, what George is referring to, like, he's a high school history teacher, sort of, flatline sort of guy. Everyone likes him, just sort of very kind guy, but he really wants to be a great trombone player, but he's just never tried it. And so that's what he really wants the machine to tell him he'd be great at. Yeah, and so I'm always that way too, man. If I could do something else, I would love to be some sort of incredible musician, but yeah.
And you're in the right city, or not do it, because it's too not much elbow room. There are little things in that novel that are perfect, I think, where I might just spend some time describing the principal of the school, Pat, I think is her name.
Yeah.
You never really explained what she looked like, but you said twice in the novel, you said she reached for her keys out of either her breast pocket or her pants pocket. He couldn't tell. So it just lets us know that she's just kind of a moundish kind of human being. That is the perfect. That's just so perfect. I giggled. Well, no, I don't. I laughed. Good job. Good job.
Thanks. No, I appreciate it. And it's like, this novel is, different than my first one. That the first one was like, pretty dark, and although there may be some humor in there, it's a much more sort of, serious one. And this one has a lot of serious stuff going on too, but it felt so good. And I wanted to talk to you about this too. It felt so good to sort of allow myself to write funny.
Yeah. Oh, you're freezing.
Like to actually embrace the idea of being serious and funny at the same time. And so I was going to ask you, a lot of people consider you a funny writer. I mean, I find a lot of your stories hilarious as well, but I was sort of curious in your mind at what point, you sort of said, I can be literary and funny at the same time.
Yeah, I think especially in the last 10 years, a lot of my stories have turned really sad toward the end of the story. Things, and I know this when I go out and do readings and people are laughing, and then you hear them go, uh-oh, maybe I wasn't supposed to be laughing all that time because this is kind of dark. It all goes back to that Samuel Beckett, there's nothing funnier than human misery, and, just put characters in an awkward position, and we, the reader, say, oh, I want to see how this character gets out of it. And a lot of times that character thinks he or she gets out of it, but the reader goes, uh-oh, not out of it, or whatever, It doesn't have to go, if there's a soundtrack to my stories, it doesn't have to go dun, dun, dun at the end, but kind of close to it, I guess. What you do, and I think what I'm trying to do is, I read, somebody else said this, not me, and I don't know who said it, but he said like the ending of a short story needs to be both totally surprising to the reader, but also predictable. There's no other way, right? And I felt that when I read The Big Door Prize, I was reading and went, whoa, I didn't know that was, but oh yeah, that has to happen. That's how this has to end. So great job, man.
Yeah, well, thanks. I appreciate it. I mean, I don't know, with this one, I just realized that, the books I was reading, I try to read whatever, I know other writers are reading. I'm seeing them mentioned on Twitter, or my students are telling me, hey, you got to read this. Like, and lots of times, how it is, if you're reading a lot of student work or you're working on your own stuff, you don't get a chance to read a lot of the books you really want to. And so, you know, every once in a while I'd read, like I finally read The Secret History by Donna Tartt, believe it or not, after all these years. I read it this year for the first time. Incredible. But then I was also noticing that every time I was going to a book on my own, I was looking for something funny. I was looking for novels that like were entertaining me and making me laugh. And I think it started when I read The End of Vandalism about maybe 3 years ago or so for the first time. And I thought it was hilarious. There was just something about the mood and the tone of it that I started looking for more books that like, man, why? I love laughing. I love funny TV. I love sitting on the porch and laughing with friends. Why don't I enjoy, you know, why do I think I can't enjoy this in a book? And so, you know, then I read like Throwback Special, and I read Dog of the South, and like all these books that are like, man, these things are hilarious. You know, or Straight Man by Richard Russo, and they're also so well written. Yeah, and it was almost, I feel like I almost discovered some new genre that everyone else knew about, but I was like not allowed to know about in school or something. It was weird, like the funny novel, you know?
You know, that's, this may be, when I, you know, I'm from Greenwood, South Carolina, and when I went to college, they must have just needed some kind of quota of redneck boys from Greenwood County for my college. But, you know, I'd only read like Wuthering Heights, Charles Dickens, Ethan Frome, you know, Scarlet Letter. I didn't think anything could be funny.
Right.
So I got to college, I had this, of all things, a French professor that said, you got kind of a weird sense of humor. Here, read Eugenie Ionesco, Samuel Beckett, Harold Pinter. And I had a philosophy professor who's like, read Gravity's Rainbow. You know, that's how old I am. That would have been out a few years when I went to college. And then I came across, you know, John Irving's World According to Garp. I said, that's funny, you know. It's probably not in vogue right now, but back then I thought it was really funny. So then when I started teaching in my stupid career, that's what I went for, is this can be funny. And students go, God, you know, so many of my students go, I didn't know we could read funny stuff. We're stuck with The Old Man in the Sea. Not real funny. You know, Moby Dick, that's real funny, Queequeg. But, so, you know, but I'm that same way. You know, during this pandemic, I went back and reread, no, I didn't read all of Charles Portis, but I read Dog of the South, and I reread Grit, and I reread Norwood, which is short and hilarious. And, you know, my man is Lewis Norton.
Me too.
I didn't find Lewis Norton until later in life. You know, I mean, like after the year, well, he published kind of later in his life, but it was in the 2000s when I came across like Music of the Swamp.
Yeah.
And
well, I came across that book in the same class that I was reading you in, right? And so that was Tom Franklin's class, and there's no person on the planet I owe more to than Lewis Norton in terms of style, in terms of allowing me to understand that I could sort of, you know, be myself, do my own version of the South, you know, you know, be funny, not have to be super tough guy all the time in the South, you know, which, you know, I know the grit lit stuff and all that. You know, I love it. I like to read it, but I can't write it. It's not me, you know. And Lewis Norton was one of those people that showed me, no, there's plenty of space to be the weirdo you in the South.
Yeah, I agree. And I can't write that gritlet. I don't hunt. I'm scared of guns. I'd shoot myself if I had one. You know, I don't even fish anymore. I mean, every time I fish, I hook the stupid fish in the eyeball and just feel bad, you know. So,
well,
that's the same thing. And what I learned also from Lewis Norton, and I'm a slow learner, so I didn't try this story until I got a buddy named Dale Ray Phillips, and he wrote one book.
Oh, God, that book is incredible. My People's Waltz. Yes.
My People's Waltz. So I'm looking, and I knew these stories singly, but when they were all together, I went, golly, Dale, all of these are first-person retrospective. So you got an adult saying, when I was 10 years old, my father and I, or my father used to take me, but you get to use an adult voice. And that's what Lewis Norton does in all those, or in Music of the Swamp. Yeah. That's what I was been trying to do, you know, like in Why Dogs Chase Cars. I just kind of discovered that in the year about 2000 and kind of found my voice, you know. Yeah.
Well, so I was, you know, thinking about the process of putting together a collected stories, you know, and so you have earlier Lynn said you have 200 published stories, okay? So for 200, that means you've had at least like 200 good ideas. How many bad ones have you had? how many dead ones are out there?
Oh, you know, I keep track, and I publish about 1 out of every 4 stories, I think. Now I'll send them, like I'll send to Atlantic Monthly, New Yorker I've never been in,
Right.
you know, big magazines, you know, Harper's, Georgia Review, Southern Review, One Story, all those kind of places. If it gets down to, you know, crap on the bottom of my shoe journal, I figured that this is not a very good story, and I just let it die. And sometimes there'll be a little idea in there or something, you know, but rarely.
So do you feel like at this point are you able to recognize the difference between one that's going to hit and one that's not, or no?
Never.
Wow.
And I also never know. Yeah, I just don't know. I also don't remember them. I mean, I remember about 4 or 5 stories, but if you said, hey, remember that story where you wrote, you might read me a whole paragraph. I'll go, that sounds like me. Boy, that sure didn't sound like me, but I don't know what the hell that story is, you know.
That's what I was curious about. So in the process of putting together, you want more, and you know, I don't know how many stories are in there, 20 or 30 or something. What was it like going back and rereading yourself over the years? And you know, what was it like putting it together? What was that experience like?
I was glad I didn't own a gun. I don't, you know, I just went here's the ones that I figured if it came out in a big time, you know, I got 5 or 6 stories come out at Atlantic Monthly, and I know that those are probably okay for the most part. Or if it was in like News Stories from the South, I figure, or some anthology, pushcart or something, I figured that it can't be that bad, right? But then there were some. Well, then I had to look, and you know, I mostly write in first person because I hear stories in first. You know, I don't hear George went into the grocery store today and yelled at a man for not wearing a mask. I hear, I went into the store today and yelled at a man for whatever. So, but I know there's 30 stories. So I knew that 30 first person, especially since 10 of them are going to be those first person retrospective ones, they're going to start really sounding alike. So I had to go back and look for third person. And I write third person stories just for kind of practice, or so I might write 4 or 6 a year or something like that. I don't like writing in third person. I like reading other people's stories in third person, but mine sound like essays. I think they're just boring as hell. My own third person voice. So if I had 30 stories, so I went and I picked like 9 third person, there's 2 second person, and 9, 11, I guess 19 first. Is that math?
Yeah, I don't know the math.
9, yeah. And Meg Reed, the editor at Hub City, I mean, they came to me, and I mean, they're here in Spartanburg, and I knew they're doing great stuff, and I knew they're kind of like Algonquin in the old days, you know, when Algonquin was doing Joe McCorkle and Lee Smith and Clyde Edgerton or whoever, and Lewis Norden and whatever. So Meg kind of put them in order. The only one I had that I said, this has to be the last one is the one that's the last one that I've read at Thacker Mountain. It's called What Could Have Been. It's kind of like Kendall saying, after you read all these stories, like, okay, most of these people want a better life or want to live in a better town or want to reinvigorate their own town. Here's what might happen if you do that. Don't always, you know, don't wish too hard for this, or you can end up with a bunch of Hardee's and Burger Kings on every corner.
Well, I mean, it's funny because that was the last story that I read today before this thing. I wanted to ask you about it. I think that story is incredible, and especially coming after reading the others is just sort of like an emotional swell at the end. But I was also going to ask you, the way the story operates is like you're sort of saying, you know, you do this, you're looking at all the things the town used to be, all the things, you know, and where we've gotten now, and the characters like in this old drive-in theater that's not there anymore. I was going to ask you, you know, so if you were to do that, you know, you've had this incredibly distinguished career, you know, and you go back and you look to where you started, what advice would you give your younger self now?
I wish I would have read more. I was not a big I didn't read it when some of my professors saying, like, you need to go read all of Faulkner and you need to go read. I didn't read any Faulkner until I was 33, and I didn't read those really classic things. And I hadn't read everything of Faulkner, but I've read them. I was lucky to have read Flannery O'Connor when I was about 27 or 20. I was a philosophy major, so I didn't I didn't know. I just didn't know. But Flannery O'Connor kind of changed my life, because then I understood, oh, you can write about a small town. You don't have, my first 3 big ass unpublishable things that I wrote were in Nice, France, Washington, D.C., Memphis. I've been to Nice for like 10 days in my college. D.C., I lived about 8 or 9 months. Memphis, I'd never even been to Memphis, but I had a map of Memphis. I figured that's all I really needed. I knew Beale Street was kind of important. But then I started reading Flannery O'Connor and went, oh, yeah, you can do these little towns. So one thing advice is, don't be afraid. I mean, it's just, the protagonist wants something and the antagonist stands in the way. See what happens, and kind of write hard.
There you go. Well, I see Lynn's back.
Lynn, look at her hand. She waved and everything. Hey, Lynn.
Hello. Wow. Well, that was great. I think we have time for one more question. I don't know if we have any from the audience.
Okay.
But maybe, I love hearing y'all talk about this, because I feel like you're both so, reading both of your works, I feel like I would like you, even if I didn't know you. That you're empaths, and like how far to go and not too far. So I was going to ask that, like, do you ever write, because you do kind of bring out some people's foibles, and do you ever feel like you've gone like too far and have to backtrack on that?
Do you want to go for that one, George?
I don't know that I have an answer to that. I probably don't. Well, no. Oh, this is bad. just an hour ago, Glenda and I were outside. Hummingbirds are going crazy around our house. I mean, they must be getting ready to go south. And this one hummingbird was really coming close to my head. I mean, just kind of hanging out. And I said, God, what about a character who has a bad, like, port wine birthmark, and hummingbirds are always flying around it? And Glenda went, no, don't do that. So yeah, sometimes I might have things like that, but usually it's an editor who says, no, George, you've gone too far. What about you, Neil? I'm not very good at that.
I don't know. I mean, I would consider that like definitely one of my weaknesses as a writer is sometimes I'm not willing to go so far with some characters, especially when it comes to like, pain or sort of irredeemable action. I mean, I was reading Odie Lindsay's new novel, which I think is really great, and he's got a scene where a character that you're really hoping like stays clean, like doesn't, and it like hurt my feelings so bad, and that I recognize that person was now real to me, and I knew that if I was writing that, I was like, would I be able to do that? Would I be able to sort of put my foot on the heart and then step? Yeah. I don't know. A lot of writers can, and I admire them for it. I feel like that's one of my weaknesses, is maybe not going far enough sometimes with people. I don't know.
What about, let me ask Neil one more little quick question. In the novel, Father Pete has a niece named Trina. She's kind of a main character too. Right. And she's got just a horrific home life, and I don't want to spoiler alert, but she's kind of a bad she's a bad girl, kind of, with a heart of gold, I think. But how did you come up with that? That's a really realistic teenage young woman.
Probably because, the whole time I was a teenager, I was also just terrified of teenage women. And so I was thinking, of all the ways that they're scary, that they were to me. But, honestly, it was once I sort of got that storyline with Jacob and is a teenage boy in the book, I was just really trying to think of, well, what are all the ways that this could be frightening, to a young guy, right? Yeah. So I think that her story, unfortunately, is like not uncommon, in terms of what you find out eventually sort of has happened to her and what sort of what's sort of making her tick, right? So I think, unfortunately, it wasn't that hard to come up with her storyline, because that type of thing is happening a lot. But she was fun to write, and also one of the biggest challenges of the book for sure, trying to sort of figure out her motivation and also cloak it, for Jacob.
If on just a real quick side note, this morning, early in the morning, on one of those channels was the not Oscar-worthy film Rock and Roll High School, starring the Ramones from 1979. Now, I love the Ramones. Maybe the worst movie ever made, though. I mean, it was so bad it was hilarious. But you had a couple Trinas in that scene. Trina in your novel can act a lot better.
Well, that music reference, that classic music reference, reminds me that I'd sort of be remiss if we didn't ask you about the John Prine reference, the Big Door Prize. That's a great song, and then your last book also was My Sunshine Away. So what is it with you and music?
I don't know. I never intended for that to happen necessarily, but I mean, I think that what happened with My Sunshine Away is that what came really at the very end. The novel was totally written before I had the idea for that title. My original title, my agent thought was horrible, so she asked me to change it. So that sort of came at the end. This one, I was maybe 2 years into writing it, and I recognize I'm just a big John Prine fan. Okay, so like there's not like a day that goes by in my life when one of his lyrics doesn't sort of go through my head in almost any situation. I mean, if I'm at a four-way stop, I hear, and the yield went around and around and around. I mean, it doesn't matter. Like he's part of my life. And partly the reason is because he's part of the reason my wife and I got together. She sort of introduced me to his music. I was trying to, impress her by playing the guitar when I didn't know how. And she was like, "Why don't you try from John Prine?" And so I went and looked him up, and turns out his stuff's really easy to play. So I learned some of his songs, and she was impressed. And so that's kind of what got me, the life that I currently live. So I owe a lot to him, and I'm grateful. So I was a couple years in the book and realized, like, okay, what I'm trying for here is like a novel that sort of like earns sort of a true love story. Like, I want this couple to be in love without irony. It's like they don't have to, I want it to feel real and earnest. And I feel like that's what his music does. He's able to write songs that, sometimes they're really sad, but typically they're sort of celebrating a sort of love that's able to sort of wink at itself, but at the same time, it's true. There's no other place these people would rather be than with each other, even though they have all their different faults, and all that type of stuff. And so I recognized the tone of John Prine's music was very much what I wanted out of the book, right? And so about 2 years in, I had the scene with Principal Pat that George mentioned earlier, where she gets a readout that says she's supposed to be a carpenter, and the line just came out, "Well, my grandpa was a carpenter," which is a John Prine song. I was like, oh, you know what? I'm just gonna lean into this. And so once I did that, I started looking at different chapters, and I was like, man, this chapter title could be a John Prine lyric. And next thing I know, almost every chapter in the book is a John Prine lyric. The title, The Big Door Prize, comes from In Spite of Ourselves. That was me and my wife's wedding song. I think it's one of the greatest love songs ever written. And so that was it. And so, the plot of the book has nothing to do with him, but anyone that likes his music, I mean, I've got, I think, 40 different references to him in there. So hopefully they'll find something that they like in there.
That's a great idea. I mean, that fell in your lap. That's great.
I want to remind everybody that, not only do we have their books available at Square Books, but we have signed copies. They were both very gracious enough to sign book plates for us, and we have put them inside the books. So they're signed books. Thank you all for joining us, our lovely audience. Thank you for supporting Square Books. Thank you for supporting these authors. Thank you, Putnam and Hub City, for publishing these great authors. Thank you, Zoom, for bringing us together as close as we can be. And we'll look forward to, I was trying to make a John Prine reference. Rainbow, something, we'll be sitting on a rainbow. We can get
on a rainbow. Yeah, I mean, who can write "Sitting on a Rainbow" and not be sappy and not be cheesy? I mean, only him. He earns it.
I
But I mean, I just want to say honestly, really quickly, this is one of the coolest things I've ever done in my career. I have so much respect for you, George, and your writing. And, you know, Lynn, as you know, Square Books is one of my favorite places on the planet. This is amazing for me. Thank y'all. I've been nervous about it for like a week and a half. So thank you.
Back at you, Neil. I really, really love this novel.
Thanks.
I mean, I wouldn't be putting it out. I want to be your PR person. I've been doing what I can.
Thank you all. Thank you, everybody. Good
Thank
night.
you, everybody.